ASUS usually offers the best quality on this kind of motherboard. As we can see, the connectivity here is at the top. Hi everyone and welcome back. As you guys know, AMD has released a new lineup of CPUs, the 7000 series. This lineup brings a lot of changes, including the new socket, which is the LGA 1718. So similarly to the Intel platform, the pins aren't anymore in the CPU, but now are into the motherboard socket. This new AMD CPU are also paired with the new chipsets, the X670E and the B650, both of which have the Extreme or E version and the normal one too. Today I will go through the specs and details of the ASUS ROG Strix X670E gaming Wi-Fi. I think this motherboard could be the most used motherboard in the mid or high-end AM5 builds. So without further ado, let's start.
Alright, here we got the box with the motherboard. Let's open it and check what we have inside. We have this small box here. I'll open it in a minute. Here there is the motherboard itself. We will get to the details in a minute. Let's check what we have here, and let's start with this thing first. What is type it? Massive bundle PCIe M2 heatsink. This should be the additional heatsink for the slots, if I'm going to be able to open it.
One eternity later.
Okay, here we have the M2 heatsink. This is the massive one in case you want to change the default one, and we will get to that in a minute. And this is the Wi-Fi antenna. Let me check. Okay, this is have a magnetic surface here, so you can move it around your case if you want for a better coverage of the Wi-Fi. Alright, let's go check what we have underneath here. Alright, the manual. This is important, guys. If you are building the PC for the first time, or if you are new to this kind of platform, etc., I will suggest you to read this manual and to keep it near to you wherever you are building. This is a keychain. Okay, they always include in this kind of high-end motherboard. What is this? The papers. Thank you card.
Under the manuals there are two SATA cables, so you can install all your SSD drives, some ties for the cable management, and some accessories for installing the M.2s with these pads in case you have the two M.2s. Then there is a GPU graphic card holder. I find this to be really sturdy and really useful for the beefiest GPU out there, and there are some thermal pads for the SSDs for dissipating better the heat. Before moving on with the specs and details of the ASUS ROG Strix X670E gaming Wi-Fi, if you're new here, please consider subscribing, drop a thumbs up and leave a comment if you want to know more. This will help the channel a lot and allow me to bring more content like this. Thank you.
Alright, here it is, the motherboard. As you can see, this is a pretty standard design for this kind of motherboard. The ROG series, usually ASUS use this kind of gamer design. So here we have some RGB lighting, and all over the motherboard you can see this Strix, Republic of Gamers, and so on. This motherboard have a couple of nice features. Certainly when you are building a system, you want things to be as easy as possible. So here, for example, we have this button, which is the Q release button for the PCIe slot of the GPU, in case you want to remove the GPU because you are testing or building, or you simply want to change it or whatever else. You can press this button here, and as you can see, this will release the PCIe slot. That is a nice feature. I find it useful. And another feature is the Q latch, which is under the M.2 slots. We will get to that in a minute. And here is the back of the motherboard. As you can see, there is no back plate here, which I find it a little bit strange, to be honest, considering also the price tag. This is the back plate for the CPU retention. As we can see, these are the 4 screws for the retention of cooler, and these are the 4 screws for the retention of the socket itself. So let's move back. Alright guys, let's check some other details. Let's start with the powers. Here we have two connectors of 8 pins and the classic 24 pin here to connect to the motherboard. This motherboard have 18 plus 2 power stages at 110 amps. And as you can imagine, that can be really hot. So here we have this chunky heatsink. As we can see, they are really big. Also here there is a heat pipe in this part here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you. In this part here there is the heat pipe to dissipate all the heat from the VRMs. And here we have the AM5 socket. As you might know, this is a new socket from AMD. They usually have used the PGA socket. Now they are using the LGA socket. This is the LGA 7080. 7080 are exactly what you might think are 7080 pins. So you can open it similarly as you do on the Intel platform. platforms, and here we got our CPU socket. There are different ways to install the CPU. One of the easiest is to match this triangle here with the CPU. Let me show you guys what I mean. Alright guys, as we can see here we have a golden triangle here, and that should match the triangle that we have here. So you have to place the CPU as so carefully to don't damage the pins, and that's it. Then you have to close the cover. As we can see, this is similar to the previous platform AM4, so you can use the cooler that you were using with the AM4 platform. So this is something that they didn't change, so you can use the same cooler. You don't have to use other pieces or adapters to install the cooler. So moving on, here we have 3 PW connectors for the fan and for the all-in-one coolers if you have one of them. And here we have the Q code. This is useful in case of errors, or here there is a 3-pin RGB port, and this is a 4-pin RGB port. Is the start button, another 4-pin PWM connector, and here we have the USB Gen 3.2 second generation port, and here is the USB Gen 3.2 port. Here there are also 4 SATA ports. And here we have a small jumper for the overvoltage of the CPU in case you want to overclock. So you have to remove it from these 2 jumpers and move it to the last 2. So in this case you can allow to the motherboard to overvolt in case you're going to overclock the CPU. And this is the switch for the PCIe gen. If you want to move it here, for example, it's in auto. If you move it on the middle like so, it's going to be Gen 4, and the last one is going to be Gen 3. I would suggest to leave this one in auto. Here there are the connectors for the motherboard. This is the CMOS battery. Here we have other 2 connectors for the PWM fans. These are 3 ports for the USB 2.0. Here there is another 4-pin PWM connector. This is the Thunderbolt header. Here there are another 2 RGB Gen 2 3-pin 5 volts connectors, another PWM connector, and this is the audio front panel, these connectors here. And underneath here we have the M.2 Gen 5 slot. Underneath here we have the 2 chipsets. As you know, the extreme version have 2 chipsets, one here and another one here. They are fanless. Here another M.2 slot, this is Gen 4, and here there are another 2 Gen 5 M.2 slots. So let me open that so we can check. And of course here we have the PCIe slots. This one are Gen 5 and this one is Gen 4. As we can see, these are armored for the beefier GPUs or the heaviest one. Only this one is connected with Q release. For example, let me show you guys. As we can see, these have a small cord here, so wherever you press this one you will see it moving. So let me open the M.2 slots. Alright, this is the first M.2 slot. As we can see, we have this heatsink with this double sink here that goes like so for dissipating more heat. Actually, I'm using a Gen 4 SSD, but whatever you are going to use Gen 5, they are going to be a little bit more hot than the actual Gen 4. So this might be useful in this case. Of course, here we have the thermal pulse. You remember to remove the plastic, the covering plastic here. And as we can see, also here we have the thermal pads for dissipating the heat of the SSDs. Alright, so here we have all the M.2 slots. This is the Gen 4 slot, this one here, and these 2 are the Gen 5. These 2 slots here are the Gen 5 slots. Be in mind that if you install the M.2 drive here, we are going to reduce the lanes from 16 to 8 lanes of these 2 PCI slots here. This is Gen 4, and also this PCI slot is Gen 4, and the chipset X670E chipset is taking care of that. So let's have a look at the rear ports here. We have a display port, HDMI port, and we have 10 Gen 3.2 ports type A, 1, 2, 3 ports type C. One of them is a Gen 3.2 Gen 2. My goodness, these names are driving me crazy. I don't know who is. Anyway, here we have the clear CMOS button and BIOS button here. As you can see, a little bit small, so you might need one thing press them. Here is the Wi-Fi antenna, Wi-Fi 6 antenna. Here we have the line in, line out, mic in, and everything else for the audio. And this is the optical out audio. And as we can see, we have a pre-applied IO shield. So let's install the motherboard into the system and check some nice BIOS features like the dynamic OC switcher, Ryzen Core Flex, and so on.
Alright, here we are into the BIOS. For entering the BIOS, you should type F2 on your keyboard. This is the ease mode, but we want to go into the advanced mode, so type in F7. Something new that is introduced here is the expo profiles. If you have one compatible memory modules, you should enable the expo 2 profile or expo 1 profile. In this case, I have enabled the expo 2 profiles. A nice new feature here is the Core Flex, which I find it really interesting because we have 3 algorithms here for boosting the behavior or optimizing the power. For example, you can choose and to enable one algorithm here, and you can choose all the conditions here depending on the CPU temps, voltage, core current, and whatever else. I will leave it on auto for the moment. Another nice feature is the AI features here. One of those is the cooler efficiency customized. In this case, I have keep training. I will suggest you guys to leave keep training for a certain amount of days, so the motherboard will learn and will keep training depending on the cooler efficiency, on the temps of the cooler, and so on. You can even recalibrate the cooler if you want, and this is the algorithm for re-evaluating all the behavior of the cooler. In this case, I will leave it at normal. So let's go back here. Another thing is the extreme over voltage. Keep in mind, guys, that for enabling this, you have to move the jumper, the small pin on the motherboard, in order to enable this feature of the extreme over voltage. Other stuffs here are the same as other motherboards, nothing changed. Another thing I would suggest you guys to go through this submenu, which is the DRAM timing control, and in the memory presets, depending on the manufacturer of their memory, you should enable one of these presets. If you don't have one of these, I wouldn't suggest you to enable it. You should enable specifically for one of those memory. So that's it for some basic settings on the motherboard. Let me know, guys, if you want to know more about these submenus and all the settings here.
That's all for the review of the ASUS ROG Strix X670E e-gaming Wi-Fi. This motherboard has an MSRP of $500. I will let you guys decide if this is a lot or not. I just want to say that with that amount of money you can get the AMD 7000X. Anyway, here is what I like about this motherboard. The build quality. ASUS usually offers the best quality on this kind of motherboard. As we can see on the PCB, the power delivery of the VRMs, which is also amazingly high, and the quality of the heatsink over the VRMs is good too. And we have also the PCIe, a lot of PCIe slots. Some nice features can help out build more easily, like the Q release button and the Q latch button for the NVMe drives. The connectivity here is at the top. We have 3 PCIe slots, 2 of them are 5.0 and 1 is 4.0. 4 M.2 slots, 4 SATA ports, and a lot of USB ports, including a lot of ports for your RGB devices and so on. The rear panel also has a lot of ports, so you definitely can't face any issue in terms of connecting all your devices here. But despite all the good things, some other things are missing in my opinion. A backplate at this price tag is something I can understand, and I can't either find a reason why there is not there. 10 gigabit LAN port is a bit miss in my opinion. ASUS includes a GPU holder, which is always a welcome accessory. Still, when you are building a new PC, you might need some drivers, especially if this is the only system you have. Well, here you won't find any pen drive, so you can at least install some drivers. I'm wondering if that might have a crazy high production cost for ASUS. Anyway, if you guys like this video, please leave a thumbs up, drop a comment if you want to know more, or let me know your thoughts about this motherboard. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Thanks for watching.